Now, have you ever stopped to consider how your language needs to differ when you're talking to a candidate who applies for a job versus a candidate that you have headhunted? Because it is chalk and cheese how you have to handle these two types of candidate. Because one is very active. They've come to you. They've seen something that you've posted online, an ad, a job brief, a headhunt script, whatever, and they've said, yep, I'm really interested in that. Let's go, go, go. And you get those indications of like, this person's on the market. They're really hot to go. And then on the other hand, you got those very delicate headhunts where it's like they're not looking, very passive. You've piqued their interest about something. You've got to now slowly bring them along for that journey. And I see too many recruiters get that wrong. They get a candidate on a hook and then they just handle them like a normal applicant and they just lose it straight away. There is a great analogy that I want to start with, and we've talked about it before, but you've heard about if you want to boil a frog, you start the temperature cold and then you slowly bring that temperature up, and before you know it, the frog doesn't even realize that it's in a pot of boiling water. It's not true, it's an analogy, but the reality is that threats and potential threats, when they're gradual, they are not recognized by the body as much as if you were to jump straight into a hot boiling pot of water. Great analogy for what we're talking about here, because humans are quite predictable creatures, which is great, but not a lot of us understand that. We've all heard of fight or flight, and I think that when you're dealing with candidates, particularly headhunted candidates, you've got to think you're on the brink of fight or flight every single time. When you get a headhunted candidate on the hook and then they disappear, I can guarantee you something kicked in and they've gone, no, I don't want to do this. When they perceive that threat, i.e. their livelihood, their job, or they feel like they're getting invested in a process that they didn't really want to do, that fight or flight is to, I'm going to back away now. Okay? So we need to keep that in the back of our mind. And I'm going to give you some really, really, really examples today around what that looks like. What sparked this episode was I headhunted a candidate. He said, look, I'm not looking, but, I know such and such. And I said, look, why don't you have a coffee? Don't even need a CV. Go and have a coffee and see what it's all about. And he's going, all right, let's do that. Let's set that up. Got the times booked in, whatever. Very, very slowly. My mistake, but an oversight at the time, and now something I've completely corrected in my process, an automatic interview confirmation email goes out, right? Subject line, interview confirmation, company name, and then just the details, where you're meeting, who you're meeting, all that sort of stuff. Just a practicality, like this is where you're going, whatever. He calls me and says, why am I doing an interview? My brain's like, this is an interview. But it took that moment in time to go, I'm an idiot. I set this up as a very casual coffee meeting. And in his mind, that was obviously the bridge that got him to go and do this meeting. Whereas then he sees this email, it's very formal and it's like got all this detail, whatever. His fight or flight kicks in and his reaction was to push away. Now, obviously I solved the issue. I said, I'm very sorry. That's just an automatic template, mate. It's a coffee. It's very relaxed. Don't stress, But it made me think this guy's going to be jumpy the entire way of the process. Turns out he was, and we didn't make the placement. My point is here, there are so many steps in the recruiting process that we need to be conscious of what our language and what our words are doing to our candidates and how far we get them along in the process. So the first one is, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got four or so here that I want to run through, which might help somebody, right? So if you're a recruiter here and you've got a mixed portfolio of candidates that are coming from job ads, very active candidates, that's just like, cool, interview them, go through their CV, you can ask them anything, they've come to you, you're in the process, let's go, versus very passive candidates like, I'm doing a headhunt process, I've tapped you on the shoulder, I think you'd be fantastic for this opportunity, would you be open to a conversation? So the first one here is that whole interview, I just went through it, the whole interview versus a casual coffee. Okay, so applicants, interview. Headhunted, people, I'd love for you to get involved in this process, have a chat, see if this is something for you. We can set it up as a casual. Obviously, I'm going to try and make it formal, but if you get that sense that this person's like, pushing away, the casual coffee, no CV, it's okay, can really help get them into it. And then we all know, we want them to have that meeting because we know the brief and the client is great. And they're going to come out of that going, that was really good. They're talking about more money. The opportunity is fantastic. Yeah, okay, put me in. And then that might be that turning point for them. Or they turn away and say, no, look, not for me, whatever. It is what it is. I'd rather them be in it to win it than not. Let's just say we get further down the line though, and it's a high level role. A lot of the times there'll be a business case, or we need to talk about KPIs for the role. That sort of terminology can really freak out a headhunted candidate because, again, it's work, it's effort, it's maybe company secrets. It's like talking about their clients, talking about, how they operate. I'm not that invested. Like, let's not do that. KPI business plan versus, I'd love you to come back in and have a conversation around a rough outline of what success looks like. That's what we kind of want to talk about. So it might be around what do you think the metrics for success look like? What sort of outcomes would you like to see over 6 and 12 months? Just to get a better sense of, what your expectations are or what that might look like for you or whatever. So it's just soft approach versus like, okay, we need a business plan, right? Another one, and again, moment of truth, right, is offer stage. How often have you got to offer stage, even if it is a candidate or whatever that's applied or a headhunt, and it gets to offer stage and you say, cool, we've got an offer, and the candidate freaks out because they're not ready. We had it in our office just this week where a client had a meeting with a candidate, had one meeting, went really well, it was partner level, lawyer, and then a week goes by and the client says, cool, we really liked her, we'd like to make an offer. Jesus, we knew it was too soon. It was one meeting after a headhunt. We let the candidate know, and she just went, whoa, an offer? Like, we've had one meeting, it was just too soon, right? And so in that situation, when they happen, the conversation needs to be less around, hey, we have an offer, or if you get the sense that your candidate's not ready to accept an offer, I'm still looking at, this internal promotion, or I've got these other interviews, whatever, you've got to time your offer correctly. Otherwise, they're going to push back or take the absolute piss out of that offer, right? So it's offer versus, hey, I've got some numbers to consider, particularly in a situation where you've got good numbers, right? It always helps, yeah? We've got some numbers to consider. Would you like to have a discussion, or can we have a discussion around what that might look like? It's not an offer. No fight or flight, remember? An offer is very much, I need a yes or no answer. You're putting that candidate into a situation where they're going to have to give you a very binary, a yes or a no answer. Whereas I'd love to have a conversation with you around numbers, where you're at, what your expectations look like, what their sort of structures look like, and what that could look like. Very different feeling, right? There's no reason to feel fight or flighty in that situation. That's another conversation. So again, knowing which camp your candidate sits in is really vital for that language that you use. One that I've been using lately that's been it's almost like a pre-close. We always talk about the pre-close. Like, if I were to get you X, Y, Z, are you willing to accept, is a pre-close. And then when you call them back, it's like good news, bad news. Bad news is I didn't get it. Good news is I got you more. We got you this. I've accepted on your behalf. Congratulations, right? That's a will you accept very hardline conversation. But again, if your candidate is still not sure and you're not quite at that level where giving them the figure is the right approach, I like asking maybe after each interview, even the first interview, can you see yourself leaving your current role for this company? It's a nice, softer way of going, I can. And most times, like, well, look, I could. There is a world where I could see this happening. Great. What does that look like? And then it kind of turns into other questions. So again, the whole thing about today is the crux of this is every candidate has a fight or flight in them. A candidate who has applied to you, who's very active in the job market, their fight or flight is probably not going to be triggered as much because they're very engaged in the idea of finding new work. The fight or flight mechanism gets triggered very easily, very itchy trigger finger for headhunted candidates and passive candidates, right? So we need to be thinking with every time we get on a call to these people, or every time we send some messaging out to them, what's going to trigger them, and how do we circumnavigate that? We just want to keep luring them slowly, because the more they get involved and the more information that they get and the more invested they get in this process, before they know it, they are the frog in the pot of water. It's boiling, but they don't realize it, and they're at offer stage. And ultimately, that is our job. It is influence. It is getting people to the table, getting them through a process in one piece, hopefully to give your clients an opportunity to present a meaningful offer. And the amount of placements I've made with that sort of approach is almost infinite. Like it's what we do well, and it's why people pay us. And I have no qualms in coercing people along that way. Be very conscious around fight or flight. It's very real. It's why your candidates are bailing on you. It's why they're ghosting you. You're going too hard, too fast. I've heard too many recruiters like headhunt, script on InMail and not get response and say, hey, I need you to move quick because such and such client is doing this. Like, they haven't even bitten on the first message, mate. Why are you putting pressure on them? All that's going to make them do is go, get fucked. All right? So keep this in mind. Where are your candidates coming from? Application or a headhunt? And then choose your language accordingly. Like, share, subscribe, helps us grow. As always, have an amazing day, and may all your deals come true.